Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. It's Wednesday, November 8th, and we're continuing our study of placing uh, the historical application of Daniel chapter 11 with the present truth application. And so you can see the document there. That's the one we've been working on. We're going to continue to work on it. So before we do, can you join me in a word of prayer? The dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time that we have this morning to open up your word together. And we invite your Spirit to speak to us, to guide and direct us, to correct us, and to set our feet on the right path and to guide us along this path. We know, Lord, that there's much that we're studying that we're not totally familiar with, all the details, and we need your Holy Spirit that inspired this book to speak to us. So be with us now in this study, we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, well, good morning again. Now, I've been struggling with this. We have been struggling with this because we've gone through this a number of times in different ways. But this here, by taking the historical application, which is by Mark Alden Swearingen, who's put this together, but we've put in the red, where he has the historical application, we've placed the present truth application. And it's starting to make sense, though there are some things that, when we first looked at them, didn't make sense. And so now we're understanding this, I think, in a much clearer way. So we're just going to go over this section. So this is Daniel 11, verse 5 to 6. Now, verse 3 and 4 are going to start with the time of the end. They're going to have a precursor to the time of the end. And one of the things that we have done with this is that we have this chart of these verses that we place them line upon line. And so I just put this in here, and I'm going to be putting more things in here, some of the stuff dealing with the Hebrew numbers and the calculations that we've done help us in this. So this document, when it's done, is going to be, I think, a fairly comprehensive study of our understanding of Daniel chapter 11. And we know that we had the first part dealing with the kings of Persia, so I just put that chart in there, dealing with all the way up to Trump. I didn't put in the part dealing with Revelation 17, but just here with how we looked at these lines. Now, we're going to finish this off, but this section here today. So we're just going to go through it, see if it makes sense. So the king of the south, that's Ptolemy the First. Now, I do have a chart here, by the way, put in here, the Ptolemaic and Seleucid kings, that I got, and I had to correct some of the things in it. But Ptolemy the First, the son of Ptolemy Lagus, governor of Egypt. So he's going to be given this this territory at the death of Alexander, and he is going to become the king of Egypt in 306. Right. So there's a lot of things that happen. First, he's just basically the governor, and so that's where we're starting here with him. And the king of the south, that's Ptolemy the First, he's going to, because he's the king of the south of Egypt, he represents the UN, or the globalists. Now we know that this is past because of the previous verses, that this character of the Soviet Union, which is who we're pairing Alexander with, is going to pass from the Soviet Union to the United Nations. So the United Nations, in a sense, is the globalists, right? But they're also the king of the South. So they become this aspect of what the king of the South was, what the Soviet Union was. now is attached to the UN. But yet, we can say that this whole kingdom of Alexander Greece also represents the globalists. That is, the Greek kingdom represents the globalists. So that the fact that the king of the south now takes this characteristic, that is, the UN takes this characteristic. Another part of the UN, the United States, one of the princes of Ptolemy I, let's put it that way, that is Seleucus I Nicator, he represents the United States. So the United States as a nation, as a member of the UN. But he shall be strong above the UN, which we know is the case with the United States. And because he has dominion over Syria, or Iran, we're going to say that this is the global economy. These are the trade routes, right? So the United States, the reason why it's powerful is because of its global economy, also its military, right? So the United States has a military that is, it governs the ocean. It allows for all of these trade. So when you say his dominion shall be a great dominion, what we can say is the United States. So we can put an equal in here because we didn't put this before. It's the, I don't know what the best word is. It's the, in controlling all the trade routes, what a good adjective is for that. It controls or governs the trade routes. How's that? We'll just put that there for now, so we may find a better way to express that. So the United States has this global economy and it controls the trade routes. So it's military. The main reason why the United States is patrolling the seas and all of these things is so that goods can get transported from one country to another. Without the United States doing this, many countries would have no way to transport their goods. They would just be, pirates would just come in and take them, or other countries would take them. So the United States is the one that does this. It's not the UN that does it. It's the US, right? So it's the one that really monitors this whole situation, that provides for the global economy. And so some people have said, if the United States collapses, then the global economy collapses, right? So that they need to have their military doing this. Now it says in the end of years. So we're going to say that this is going to go back to, we're talking about these wars, the First and Second Syrian War. We're going to say that this war in Afghanistan, this war on terror, are now connected. So after the First and Second Syrian Wars, that is 9/11 as the empowerment of the first angel. So we're going to go back to 9/11 as a symbol of the empowerment of the first angel, dealing with Islam, and we're going to say that is how we take these First and Second Syrian Wars. We're going to parallel it in this history with the war against this war, the Soviet-Afghan War, which is a proxy war between the US and the Soviet Union. Then we're going to see, once we get to 9/11 and Islam comes into play, so Islam then attacks the United States, which parallels August 11th, 1840. This becomes an empowerment of the first angel. And then Ptolemy II Philadelphus and Antiochus I Soter. So obviously you still have, so you have now the Ptolemy II. So Ptolemy I has passed away by the time they have this alliance where they conclude peace between them because of these wars. And you have Antiochus I, and he's going to be, if we just look at these kings down here, you have Seleucus Nicator. He's the first, so I should put that here. you're going to get in this history. So you have Ptolemy the second of Philadelphus and Antiochus Soter. Now, this peace treaty I didn't put in here, but I'm going to put it in here. So this is the time of those wars. And I'm just going to add a row here. So this is going to be 252. This is going to be, why does that one do that? No idea. Okay, peace treaty. Or maybe you find a better way to do it. But anyway, for now, I'll put that there. That's 252. So we can see there's this symbol here. Might be able to just do it like some other way. Anyway, for now, I'll leave that. I'll make it look better. So they're going to have this at 9/11. They conclude peace in 252 BC, and we're paralleling that with 9/11 as the arrival of the second angel. So we have 9/11 here twice as the formalization and as the empowerment symbolized here. And for the king's daughter, Berenice, daughter of Philadelphia, of Ptolemy II, we're saying this is wokeism. Now, I don't really like that word, except that it is a shorthand for a lot of things. And it just becomes this thing that develops from 9/11 that starts to become really grow and dominate our culture. So this wokeism, this daughter of the South, so it's a daughter of Egypt, right? So it's going to say daughter of the South. We're going to put that as Egypt, right? We could have said the Ptolemaic Empire, but this is the UN, right? Now, I don't know if UN is the best way to describe it. We could say UN globalists. Maybe that might be a better way. Now, just a note here, just to remind people about some things, a parallel between our history and the history of the external history, right? So one of the things we know about this history, this time of the end. What's the connection between 9/11 and 11/9? I don't know if this is a good place to talk about it. Just I know it's a broad question.
Quite broad. It would seem that 9/11 was a message to those that prophetic time is spiraling down. 11/9, well, 9/11 is primarily to those within the Adventist Church, and 11/9 is primarily to those that are within the movement that are needing to sharpen their focus on what's going on.
Okay, well, you're sort of answering my question, but you're sort of just grazing it somewhat. But I understand what you're saying. So the thing that's going through my mind is we have 9/11. We have this peace treaty, right? So this is where the globalists really join with the US, right? Now we know, of course, within the Adventist Church, we have spiritual formation, right? We're going to have that Patriot Act spiritual formation. But within our movement, we have 11/9, and 11/9 is going to be Parminder and Tess, right? So we have what's happening on 9/11 on sort of a global scale. In 11/9 in our line, which is also the arrival of the second angel, because it parallels first day of the first month, April 19th, 1844, just as 9/11 does. So those two come together. We can see that one of the big issue there in this movement was wokeism, right? So they're tied together in that way. And now another interesting thing is if we go back to we take Tess and we connect her with AOC, right? There's this connection because of they're born 391 and a half days apart. One's born October 13th and the other one's born November 9th, right? So you have one's born October 13th, 1989. The other one's born November 9th, 1991, if I remember correctly. 1990, is it 1990? Yeah, 1990. So one's born in 89, one's born in 90. 391 and a half days apart, which was the same thing we had with that time set. So there's these symbols that tie all of these, the 11/9 and 89, or 1989 together with 9/11 and 9/11 with 11/9 2019. But it's this wokeism. And I think that would be the best word to describe what happened within the movement, was wokeism. Okay. So Egypt is this characteristic of atheism, right? The king of the South, this atheistic power, which moved from the Soviet Union into the UN gradually over time. But once the Soviet Union fell, the UN takes that role. Now they shall come to the king of the north, right, the USA. They make this agreement, peace through a marriage alliance. We're saying that this is the Patriot Act in the United States, spiritual formation in the Adventist Church. But she, that is this daughter of the king of the South, this wokeism, shall not retain the power of the arm, lose her position from the former queen, Laodice. So she's going to lose her position, not retain her position. And the arm here is going to be this decision of the people, right? So we're saying that now Laodice means a people judged is another way of looking at it. But they can be judged or a people judging, right? In this case, making the decision, this democratic process. So through the democratic process, Trump comes and wins this election. And he's in this line here, he's doing something similar that Xerxes does, is he's stirring up all against the realm of Grecia. But here, it's going to be the former queen of the king of the north, right? The king of the north being the United States. Now, at first we were trying to say, well, maybe this represents some kind of Protestantism or something. We could also maybe say it has something to do with the Constitution and so forth. But I think the best, at least at this point, is to say that this is about the democratic process that elects Trump. Because as far as Laodice is concerned, I mean, she's going to come against also the king of the north. So even though she's the queen of the king of the north, she's going to assassinate the king of the north, right? Antiochus II, right? So obviously this would have to deal with this fickleness of the populace, of the democratic process, in contrast to that of republicanism, right? So any thoughts on that? So this is one of the things that, we're struggling with a little bit, seeing if this makes sense, that Laodice represents this. Now she could represent something else. Like she could maybe represent the Constitution. In some way as well, but I don't know exactly how. But it's So I'm still kind of wavering on the best way to describe this, but this seems to work well. So once we have Trump elected, now the thing is, we have the election of Trump, but Trump isn't really represented by any person, right? Or anything here, other than, we see that the decision of the people has this process against wokeism. But Trump isn't like the king of the North or the king of the South in this line, right? So that's where, I have a little bit of problem with the election of Trump. Trump isn't one of the players in this line, per se, right? We're not representing him as either of the kings of the North. We tried looking at that, seeing if we could line these up with the kings, and it wouldn't work that way. But then we say, neither shall he, that's the USA. So Antiochus is representing the US, right? Stand. So neither shall he stand. He's going to be assassinated by Laodice. And again, this would be the democratic process that puts Biden in there. Doesn't mean it's a pure democratic process. It could be definitely corrupted. So, Angela says, well, it's against the will of the people, but that doesn't really matter in this context, because what this just represents is the democratic process, whether corrupted or not, right? So we have Biden being elected. Now, nor his arm. This is the military power of the United States. It becomes impotent. That is what the United States was doing, especially we could see under Trump, but even long before that, is it provides this security. And if Trump had been president, it's unlikely that the Ukrainian-Russian war would have occurred, and definitely what happened with Israel would probably not have occurred. Trump was, doing all kinds of things as a master manipulator to help people fulfill their interests, so that all sides sort of win, right? He's a master negotiator, and knows how to put pressure and manipulate things himself. So this American military power becomes impotent. We've seen that under Biden. Now we're going to see in this next part, it says, wokeism shall be given up, executed by the will of the people. This is the backlash against wokeism, right? And they that brought her, the execution of her attendants, casualties to the proponents of wokeism, and one whom she begat, her son Biden. So we're saying that this is looking to the future, right? We're looking at this backlash coming, and Biden is going to be the son, right, of Berenice, right? So, and then he that strengthened her in these times, well, that's Antiochus II, and we just have to say, well, how do we address that? So how do we address strengthened her in these times? So, we just say the USA, because that's how we've had Antiochus II represent the USA. So we could say that the US was supporting wokeism, but the United States shall not stand. So if we're going to say this is the USA, well, this would imply that the USA has a fall. So the USA comes to an end in some ways after Biden because of the Civil War. Right? So that's where this line brings us to. Brings us to this time. Now, any thoughts on that so far?
How would that affect some of the other things that we've already come to understand?
How would it affect it?
Yeah,
Well, it's in line with what we've understood. Just that the details, what it does is it takes this part when we go to the next part here. This must be a repeat of this history. Because unless this is the history of the Sunday law, maybe it is, of what's going to happen further. And that's what we haven't decided. So when we had Persia, Persia just represented our line. But now we have Greece, and we can say, well, here we have our line. You know, it's already in those verses 3 to 6. So do we take these other verses, which are going to deal with things that obviously address the Sunday law? Do we apply them just to our history? So this is what we were struggling with before. Do we just apply them to our history as a repeat and enlarge, or do we see this as a continuation? So in this line here, we have this January 20th, 2025 is the fourth angel arriving. And it could be that this first part just represents this history of the Soviet-Afghan War, the time of the end, September 11th, and all of these different waymarks in our line dealing with Biden, because this is primarily, we were addressing this in connection with these symbols. So we're sort of putting together, describe it. We're looking at our history. So we're looking at what happened with the election of Joe Biden and the election of Trump. They're in this line, right? They're hidden in here through these symbols. So we saw that that's not on the surface of it when we just read it, because it's about these bigger powers. But Trump and Biden come to play in this line. The election of Trump, November 9th, 2016, being 1,533 days to the inauguration of Joe Biden, right? So, and we had addressed these other symbols. So Trump and Biden are in this history. And so we have them here as we go through this, and they seem to be in their place, right? So I don't know, any other thoughts on that? Because when we look at this line, because this is the line we drew out for this, it fits with what we have in these parallels. But now when we look at the next section, do we go back to the time of the end? And you can see here, like what I have in the red here was what I did back in 2017, based on Chawatu's understanding that other people were sharing. Maybe we could say Jeff's understanding. But we would see that this goes back to the time of the end again. It goes back to Napoleon. Well, Napoleon and what happens in this French Revolution, this is going to be France, right? Well, we're not going there, right? We're going to the time of the end in our time. So we take this story, and then, but out of the branch of her Berenice's roots, right? Her family show one. So when we go to Ptolemy III, your Getes, we're not going to parallel him with Napoleon, right? So we'd have to parallel him with somebody else. And the question is that a continuation of this history, or does this just go back and do this history, right? Are we just going to say, well, this is a repeat and a large, this is just going to tell us our history of what we've already been through? Or is it really telling us what's going to happen? That is, after this election, even though we would have placed this at the time of the end, you know, that's the way we would have done it when we looked at it in the past. Now we're going to say, no, this is going to continue on. And that's what I'm struggling with at this point. Okay, so any further thoughts on that? So it brings us up to the end of Biden and this time of the Civil War. So the question is this next part describing the Civil War? Or is it just going to go back and do a repeat and enlarge that's going to describe that history? I mean, it could be that it just goes back, gives us a line that ties us back to the time of the end. It's a repeat and enlarge, but it's going to bring us further along to the Sunday law, right? Because we know there's things here that are going to bring us to the Sunday law. Now, normally what we do is, right, because when we get to 11, we're going to have the Battle of Raphia, right? So I'm not really sure how to proceed. I guess we can just try things.
I think we're going to have to. We're going to have to look at this in the manner in which a lot of the pioneers had done, because there's going to be a lot of different ways that this could be placed, but there's only one right way. And directly, we have a lot of questions that really are going to have to look to be answered.
Okay. Yes. Now, the way that we were doing this in 2017, by putting Napoleon and France there, assumes the throne of Egypt, that's France, putting this basically as the time of the end in 1798. So we're taking, so remember what we were doing. We were looking at how the problem that the pioneers had in understanding Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45, right? Because they look at this history and all they see is the historical fulfillment of this prophecy, right? To them, that's the fulfillment of the prophecy, which it is, right? But they don't understand the repeat of history. And so, and they don't understand the transition from literal to spiritual that happens with Daniel chapter 11. So that when they get to Daniel chapter 11 and you start dealing with the papacy, you can't be dealing with the history in which the king of the north is literally north of Israel, and the king of the south is the one south of Israel, right? The king of the north and the king of the south become spiritual. Babylon is spiritual. King of the north is no longer, Turkey, right? The king of the north is going to be the papacy. King of the south is going to be France. So when they look at Daniel 11, verse 40, they see France there, but they see France as fighting against the king of the north and the king of the south, between Turkey and Egypt, right? So that misapplication of that gave us some insight, right? We started to understand that we didn't fully grasp our own history, just as the Millerites didn't grasp their own history. Now, so in 2017, when we're taking this part of this story and we're saying, well, this is Napoleon, and this is France, is Egypt, right? We're making an application to 1798. And now I don't think that that's a problem. I think that we can make an application because this is a history that's fulfilled in the past, and it parallels our history. And if it parallels 1989, it also parallels 1798, right? But 1798 isn't present truth. So if we're going to make a present truth application, we have to look at 1989. So I don't think it would be wrong to make an application to 1798. Now, what they did, what Chawatu did, is he switches from 1798 to 1989, right? That is, they see this progression of basically Daniel 11, verse 40, A and B are represented in this history, where we're saying that Daniel 11, verse 40b is represented in this history. That's what we look at. We look at what happened in 1989 primarily. Now, you can see how if the king of the south is conquered by, or comes against the king, let me see here. The king of the north is going to come against, let's go back here. So if we look at, I'm going to have to bring this up. So when we look at Daniel 11, verse 40, right? We're just saying there's these battles between the king of the north and the king of the south. So at the time of the end, the king of the south shall push it. So the king of the south is France. It conquers the king of the north, the papacy. And then the king of the north shall come against them like a whirlwind, right? With chariots and with horsemen, many ships. So that's the king of the north is the papacy here. The United States is its military. It's this military and economic pressure that then causes the fall of the Soviet Union, right? Now, we're saying that in 1798, you have that happen as well, right? So you have the king of the south, France, coming against the papacy in our history. Do we just say our history is just the king of the north coming and conquering the king of the south? Or do we say that when we look at the time of the end, we're going to see this same verse worked out? That is, we're going to see Raphia and Panium, right? Again, within our history. Is that what we're saying? Is that how this movement applied it? We said Daniel 11, verse 40 represents 1798 to 1989, connects that period of 100 and whatever it is, 100, how many, 191 years? Is that right?
I think that's correct.
Yeah, so 191 years. There's part 1798A and B 1989. Yeah. So we know that happens in this verse. But when we looked at Raphia and Panium, we didn't just say, well, Raphia represents 1798 and Panium represents 1989, or did we? Right.
I don't recall that we've done that.
Okay, well, I think that's what Chawatu is doing. From what I can, and I haven't had time, it's been a really busy week, to watch Chawatu's videos this week. I watched them, Friday and Sabbath last week. But I haven't had a chance to look at him this week. And because we started doing this and there was a bunch of other stuff happening. So, but that's what I gathered that he's doing. He's going to take Raphia representing 1798 and Panium representing our history. When he's looking at these verses, these earlier verses. But we're saying no, that we have in our lines, so go back here. We have Raphia and Panium in our history, right? And that's what Jeff was doing. Jeff is saying, we have Raphia. Raphia is a future event. It's going to be really what happened in 1798 happening in our history. And then what happened in 1989 happens again in our history. Does that make sense to people? That's how we've looked at it primarily. So we wouldn't go back here in these lines and put Napoleon, right? And France. Though those histories do parallel our history, right? What happens in 1798 parallels what happens in 1989. But we've made a more direct application. We're saying that what happened from 1798 to 1989 is repeated in our history. That whole history of Daniel 11, verse 40, is repeated in our history by midnight in the midnight cry. Would we agree with that? That that's how we've seen it?
Making a good point.
Okay. Okay, so if we're going to take this next verse as a continuation, then we can see in our history that there is these Raphias and Panims. That is the king of the north and the king of the south, just as they did in the past under the Greek kingdoms, right? The Ptolemaic and the Seleucid empires, that they had these different battles, and these battles repeat themselves. You're going to have the king of the south conquer, then the king of the north come and destroy them. Then you're going to have the king of the south again come, and then the king of the north. Now, we don't get to Raphia. So here in this history, so 7 to 9, out of the branch of her Berenice's root. So we're going to look at just the historic. Ptolemy III, Euergetes, stands up in his estate, assumes the throne of Rome, which shall come with an army, launch an invasion, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north. Now, when we made this application in our history, so we have this historic application, but when we made it in our history, standing up in his estate, we connected this to who? Who stands up in his estate?
Would that be Biden?
Right. So because we could count with Biden, we have this word estate in Hebrew is 3653. Okay. And we had, I'm just looking at this Hebrew numbers here for a second. So it's the word Cain in Hebrew, 3653, and that's a period of 10 years. And we attach that to this period of the four winds that scatter. So that's going to be, let's see, how did we do that? So we have the four winds of heaven. His kingdom shall be divided to the four winds. So the word four winds together is 809. And so we can count 809 days from the end of this war on February 15th, 1989, to the 20th day of the first month in 2011. That's January 11th. And then from that date we can count 365 or 3,653 days, 10 years. And it brings us to the inauguration of Biden. So by doing that, by connecting the 4 wins to him coming into his estate, we get this January 20th, 2021 date. Okay, so that's how we did it. So we're saying that this is Biden, right? So if that's the case, then we definitely are taking this history and laying it over top of the history that we just did. If that's what we're going to do. So if we're going to put this here, Berenice's roots, this again is wokeism. Okay. Now, out of his roots, so family, put here, but we would just say this UN, right? Globalists. Now, so out of wokeism, out of this UN globalists, we have this other player, Ptolemy III Euergetes. So we would have to say that this is Biden, right? Stand up in his estate, assume the throne of Egypt, that is globalist America. Just call it that. Which shall come with an army, launch an invasion. Now, what did we have an army represent earlier in this here, talking about the arms?
First, it was armed forces, and now we're talking about politicians, politics.
Yeah, so politics, right? So this has to do with so this is with Biden. This is obviously he's not coming with a military army, though in some ways there is military involved. But this is primarily about I mean, what is the army? What's the military branch of the Democratic Party? We could say the media, we could say the deep state, we could say the tech industry, whatever we want to say. Right, all of these things are controlled. There is this war going on between the king of the North and the king of the South within the US. And this war is going on through these different forces, right? So launches an invasion with an army. We could just say social media or something like that. I don't know. It's got to be broader than that because it does involve the power of the state. Right? So it's not just the media, it's also the FBI, the CIA, right? So what would be a good word? So they come with an army, they launch an invasion. Through what? What's the means? I mean, it's propaganda. Maybe that's the best way to put it. How's that? So this is going to change, right? That's not going to be the same. Now, what's the fortress of the king of the North? So we don't really need to put here the historic. We will just say here, this is the Constitution, right? In our application. Is that how we understand the fortress? The US Constitution. Any thoughts on that?
That should be correct.
Okay, so that's how we've come to understand it. So, and so this is an attack on the US Constitution. That's what the fortress is, of the King of the North, Seleucid Syria. This is the USA, right? Now, when we say it's the USA, remember we have the King of the North is the USA. We're saying Seleucid Syria. Now, so he put Syria in here, and we would say Syria is, how do we put it? Yeah, so we just had it as USA. We discussed it, whether we should use some other term. We'll just say USA. It's the simplest. And shall deal against them, attempt to exact revenge for his sister's death. Now, is there any sense of an act of revenge going on in the US now? And what is that act exacting? What are they exacting revenge on? For who? Anyone? Is there some kind of revenge being enacted right now in the United States? Okay, so we got lawfare.
Yes, it is.
Okay, now, so now this is, of course, looking back, because Berenice, right, is the one that died. Correct? Right? Right, because that's the brother, right? So Berenice was killed, and so they're going to enact exact revenge for his sister's death. So this is something that's going on in the process. So we'd have to say, well, did the sister die? Well, it is dying, right? So something's happening. But we would just say, we'll call it lawfare against Trump. We'll just put it there for now. Not warfare, but lawfare. Okay. And shall prevail. So what this says is that they're going to be victorious, if that's the case. Okay. So if what we're doing here is the case, and we're making this parallel, they would win against Trump. Now, we could say that this has happened, right? That this is what happened with Trump and what led to them winning. But this appears to happen after Biden becomes president. So that's if we're applying this correctly, with Ptolemy III being the sister of Berenice, if that's correct. Right? So we're still uncertain about what we're doing here. We know we have the general picture of it, but when we start to look at the details, there may be things that we don't see. So if Biden is going to win, you know, he has won or is winning. Now, for us, you know, looking on, I mean, we tend to have philosophical sympathies with Trump. I mean, I know I do personally. That is, I would, from the idea of being a constitutionalist, and freedom of people and so forth, I'd have sympathies with Trump. And when I look at the news and the media, I'm going to be, you know, saying, well, it doesn't make sense what's happened. But the average person out there, what they think can be quite different. Now, we know right now Trump is really popular with what's happening against him. You know, when you have, and Biden is not popular. So to say that, you know, Biden is going to win in this. In this this battle with Trump, I mean, we'd have to say he's not going to win again. I mean, Biden's going to be out of the way. So saying that and shall prevail, is that something that's still future to our history, or is this something that has happened, that there was, in a sense, because this lawfare against Trump's been going on for a long time. But we could say that Biden's already done this, but he did it before the election, before he got elected. And so is this describing his election? That wokeism, chooses Biden. He assumes the throne of Egypt, that is globalist America. He's now the head of the Democratic Party. And they launch this propaganda campaign. They enter into the fortress of the US Constitution through this election process, right? And which is the US Constitution of the King of the North of the United States. And they seek to attempt to exact revenge for his sister's death. Though the sister's death being welcome isn't definitely destroyed, but Trump has come against them. And shall prevail, win the third Syrian war. So we could just say this is this is the election, right? So I'm just going to put not this election coming up, but the election that has passed. So that's going to be the 2020 election. Okay. And shall also carry captives into Egypt, their gods, recover pagan idols captured from Egypt by the Persians in the former conquest. Now, if we're going to make a parallel with this, what would we do? And maybe what we're doing is wrong here, right? So we're trying things out. So what are the pagan idols captured from Egypt by the Persians? So what are those representing? Now, so this is Egypt. Remember, Egypt is the globalists. Now, would this be the pagan religion that's so predominant today? Is this dealing with transgenderism? Is this dealing with the pandemic? Pantheism, right?
Pantheism, I think, opens the door better.
Yeah. So pantheism, and we can just say connected with that transgenderism. Okay. Because that's all connected. Oops. Spelled wrong. But, okay. I will make pantheism capitalized. Okay, so pantheism, transgenderism. And those are recovered from, they were taken by the Persians, right, in former conquest. But we're just going to say that these are now, that is what they are capturing. They're bringing back their gods, right?
Correct.
Okay. So with their princes, now they take captives to Egypt. So whose princes are these? These are the princes of the kings of the north, right?
It's the way it would look.
Okay. So in some way they win over the politics of the world, right? In some ways. So I don't know how to put this. You know, who the princes represent. But so this is some kind of success. And have we seen it overall through the world? You know, we could say one of the princes is Trudeau, right? Or whatever. That this has happened. So I don't know how best to describe this. So the world openly is supporting wokeism. Right. So we've seen a lot happen in the last couple of years or so under Biden. What's happened with I mean, it's been promoted way more than it was before. So I don't know. What's the best way to describe this? Can somebody give me some words to put here? Because they're going to have, it says, and with their precious vessels of silver and gold. And we need to figure out what those precious vessels of silver and gold represent. So it's the spoils of war, but here there is some spoils that occur. So, you know, we've got to think about this. Now, he, Ptolemy III, shall continue more years. So he died in 221. Then the king of the north, Seleucus II, died in 226. Now, if we were going to take, okay, go on, Dwight.
When I'm looking at this, when we're looking and considering this with their princes,
Mm-hmm.
is the word that they're using here for princes a proper translation?
Well, it's a proper translation, but there's other ways it could be translated. So so this is so what it says is princes is properly, it means to be poured out. That is a libation. Also a molten image, right? So it can be, I mean, molten image like a statue, but it says
Right.
by application, a prince as anointed, as a drink offering, a duke, prince, right? So it's something that's poured out like a molten image, but also anointed. So these could be, one way I was thinking of this is that this can represent the celebrities in the world that are taken by this, right? So if I put here celebrities, maybe is the word captivated. I don't know. Would you be happy with that?
Well,
Because these are kind of
I was looking at this as a libation,
okay.
and being poured out or being molten, as you would look at metal, that means that this has come to an extremely hot situation.
Yeah, but yeah, I wouldn't take it and apply it because molten, you know, something that's poured out like a molten image, but that's not really the main meaning of the word, right? That's just by association, right? Because it's more a libation, which is a drink offering. But it does apply to princes.
Okay, because when I'm looking at this,
So I would connect it to the idols part of it. That's why I'm thinking of celebrities.
okay, but I'm asking the question, given the alternative reading
Mhm.
for their precious vessels of silver and gold. Because the alternative there is from the Hebrew, vessels of their desire,
Right,
which can come back to support what you're saying about
yeah,
celebrities.
yeah. Right, because that,
What of
yeah, okay, go on.
yes, yes, I was looking at what of merchantmen, because
Merchantmen,
we find that yes, because they're the ones who've got influence. Talk of the Bill Gates, these people who run a lot of big companies, because they're the ones who are spearheading it very much.
yeah, see, I was gonna go like with tech industries, but with that, you know, and the global economy,
Bill Gates is part of big tech, though. And when I think of molten, I'm thinking of streaming. And where do we get streaming? The constant stream of propaganda, most of which are total lies.
yeah. So what we see is that these industries have been taken over with wokeism, and it's not just the tech industries, but it would also be, you know, I mean, Bud Light, I mean,
Hollywood.
yeah, yeah. So the spoils of war, what you can say, you know, we could put in here, you know, Hollywood,
I
the
was,
tech industry.
could we put it as like the Federal Reserve who controls the money?
No. No, you wouldn't put that in there. Okay, I'm just gonna put spaces between here, so. Do like that. Maybe I'll do it like this. Okay, so this is kind of, does this sort of work? I mean, we can always change these things later.
It's giving us something more to consider.
Yeah. Now it says he, Ptolemy the Third, so we're going to put Biden in there. Now I have a hard time believing Biden's still going to be president, so. Shall continue more years than the king of the north. Now, but the king of the north here, we're not marking as Trump. Right? So even though we mark Biden as a person, we're marking him as one of the kings because he's this brother of wokeism, right? And I'm still not sure 100% whether putting Biden in there as a person or just the Democrats, right? Which we could put in there. And so that's a possibility. So just take Biden out and put in the Democrats. Shall continue more years. But we know the Democrats, Biden is a Democrat. So whether it's Biden as a person or just the Democrats here, continue more years than the king of the north. Well, the king of the north would be the USA, right? So that's how we've applied this symbol. And that may not make sense, right? Unless we understand the USA as a republic or the Republican Party or something under Trump, but we're just going to put it there. So the king of the south, Biden, shall come to Seleucus into his kingdom and shall return into his own land of Egypt. So if we're saying that that's Biden again, and then we're saying, well, Seleucus II, you know, he's going to be so this becomes
I'm really confused.
You're
Sorry,
confused?
Theodore, I'm confused. Yeah, I'm looking at Biden shall continue more years. And then Ptolemy III is supposed to have died in 221, but Seleucus II is supposed to die in 226. So therefore,
That's
Ptolemy
earlier.
would have died before.
No, you're going
But
backwards.
what's this? I was thinking lifespan. Oh, this is
Yeah.
BC. Okay.
BC.
All right.
Yeah, so, I mean, now Biden as a person, is he gonna live longer than the US? Well, if we looked at it in the sense of, if the US died on January 6, 2021, then Biden does continue more years than the US. If we're saying Trump is the last king of the United States.
Right.
Right? Okay. So the king of the south, Ptolemy III, that's Biden, shall come into his, that's Seleucus's, the US's kingdom, right? USA. So this is just still, we're not really making a distinction between the king and Syria, other than this is the USA as a land. So the USA government. So I'll just put here government. The kingdom of Syria is the USA proper, right? The land. Right. So we can just do it like that. Oops. Now, how does Biden return into his own land? Egypt, which is the UN. Maybe that's a nursing home. But you can kind of see how this fits. Though there may be ways in which we're defining these things that are too narrow, or in some ways too broad. But in this application, we've applied this to this history. So this definitely fits in this line. So this isn't going to bring us to the Sunday law yet, right? This is just bringing us to, you know, January 20th, 2025, maybe. Okay. So this is kind of a continuation of the other verses. We could have just put this all as one thing. But now Seleucus, the sons, Seleucus III, Cyrannus, Soter, and Antiochus II Magnus, shall be stirred up, desire to war against Egypt, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, raise an army, and one son, Antiochus III, shall certainly come and overflow and pass through, start the fourth Syrian war. Then shall he, Antiochus III, return, fight against Egypt, and be stirred up, even to his, Ptolemy IV, Philopater's fortress, right? So we got a fortress of, we have the fortress of the king of the north, but here we have the fortress of the king of the south. And the king of the south, Ptolemy IV, shall be moved with choler, raise an army, and shall come forth and fight with him, continue the fourth Syrian war, even with the king of the north, Antiochus III. And he, Antiochus III, shall set forth a great multitude, a large army. But the multitude, Antiochus's army, shall be given into his, Ptolemy's hands. And Ptolemy IV would defeat Antiochus III in the battle of Raphia, 217 BC. And when he, Ptolemy IV, has taken away the multitude, Syrian army, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000s, but Ptolemy IV shall not be strengthened by it, not complete the conquest of Syria. For the king of the north, Antiochus III, shall return and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, start of the fifth Syrian war, and shall certainly come after certain years. He regrouped from 212 to 204 BC with a great army and with much riches. Antiochus III would defeat Ptolemy V Epiphanes at the Battle of Panium, 2001 to 200 BC, or it's probably 200 BC, driving Egypt out of Judea, Palestine once and for all. So we can definitely see in this elements that this is Raphi and Panium, right? Now, are these future in our lines? Is the Battle of Raphi and the Battle of Panium future? Is that where we place them? Or do we say the Battle of Raphi was January 6, 2021, and the Battle of Panium is something in the future? And we do have a note in the comments dealing with there's 5 years between 2025, just as there was between 226 and 221. Okay. So my belief is that Raphia is still future, like on Jeff's line. Like we have had Raphia or types of Raphia. So Raphia is when the king of the south defeats the king of the north. And so these exist typically in our lines, but we know that there is a Battle of Raphia that is applied as a waymark in Jeff's line, which is midnight. And we would say that we're not to midnight yet. Now, one of the things in Jeff's articles, for those who've read them, because he's talking about these things that are happening with the election, what he thinks is going to happen with the Sunday law coming right away. He seems to be forgetting what was taught in the past, or he may have rejected what was taught in the past. So if you go back and you say, well, we're going to only accept light, that God was leading this movement up to 2012, and after that we have all of this darkness, and that July 18, 2020 was a mistake, though you're still having it on the lines, we're going to be corrected from that. Well, that would be October 22nd. So that would be Miller correcting October 22nd, which would fit, correctly if we understand that Jeff is Miller. But that would mean what Jeff is saying is incorrect. So, and we would take that position, what he's saying is incorrect. But he's neglecting midnight cry, Sunday law. That is, he does not seem to have accepted that our understanding of Millerite history, where we have marked 9/11 as the arrival of the second angel, and midnight as Panium, or Raphia, pardon me, and midnight cry as Panium, and the Sunday law as October 22nd, 1844, but that's the Sunday law. So that line seems to have disappeared. Has anybody seen him addressing those lines in his papers, his articles? Because I haven't read all of them. But it just seems that he's ignoring that understanding. He's just set it aside. Anybody have comments on that?
In the articles that I've gone through.
Yeah.
And I've gone through most of this using the AI reading of what he has been presenting.
Mm-hmm.
It does seem a little odd because there's just too many things that look to be being presented that are different from what we've dealt with in the past.
Yeah. Okay. Now, see, if I had changed my mind about something, like if I had evidence that something I believed was incorrect, the way that I would approach it is I would tell people, here is what I thought. Here's why I thought it. And now here is why I no longer think it. And here is what I now believe instead of it, right?
Right.
That
Correct.
would be how I would do it, right? Now, I'm sort of a logical person in that sense, but to me, that would be the logical way to do it. Now, people don't always do it that way. And I'm not saying that if I rejected this truth, I would do it that way. I might just have an emotional argument. I might just wave my hand and say all that stuff I believed was wrong. Now I'm an atheist or something, right? People
Right.
do that. Okay. They're not going to go logically through and say, here's why I came to believe in God or whatever it is that they believed in. And now here's why I no longer believe it, because I found this evidence. Wait, people just don't do that. Now, if they do it, what I've found is that they tend to downplay their belief in it ever, right? So you can see this with E.J. Wagner in his deathbed confession, where he writes out why he never accepted the investigative judgment, which is ridiculous because he did. So they're going to usually downplay the fact that they actually didn't really believe something. Okay. They're going to set up a straw man, something that nobody would believe who believed that thing. So E.J. Wagner, an example of this is he says, well, if Jesus died at the cross and he's sprinkling our blood, wouldn't it be dry by now? Right? Well, nobody believes that Jesus is literally taking blood from the cross and sprinkling it in a sanctuary in heaven, right? So these kinds of straw man arguments are what people do when they don't want to face that they haven't really intellectually addressed the problems, that intellectually addressed what it is they're rejecting, right? They can't really make arguments against it. So that's just the way human nature is, right? And so Jeff isn't doing that. He's not even telling us specifically what things he accepts and what things he does not. Yeah, such literalism is the folly of evangelicals. Yeah, but lots of us do this. Must I enter again into my mother's womb? What do you mean? I'm going to be born again? I have to enter into my mother's womb? No. Eat my flesh and drink my blood. Well, I'm not a cannibal, right? So this is the way that we avoid the truth. And what I see in Jeff's articles is this very characteristic. I don't see him laying out what he believed and logically going through and explaining what is wrong. He's put together these sort of scattered and all of these sort of narratives and has no way to really compare them. He has no structure. And the structure that we had was Millerite history. And so I don't know what he thinks about Raffi and Peniel. He probably just dismisses those, but then he's dismissing a lot of stuff that this movement came to understand. But he's still sometimes picking and choosing things after 2012 to place in his articles. So I have no idea how to look at what Jeff's writing, what he is writing, and understand where he's coming from. Right? I don't know what his positions really are. So when it comes to this issue of Raffi and Peniel, and we look at what's coming, I think we have to retain this. I mean, we've had it really clearly marked in our lines, but we know that it has to be future, that Raffia has to be a future event. And we know this because Raffia is connected with the giving of this message to Seventh-day Adventists, and that hasn't come. You can't say publishing something in the Tennessean was giving this message to Adventists. You can't say that this movement presently is giving this message to Adventism, right? It's something that has to go to the world, and we have to figure out our own message, where we are, what part we have to play, what our role is, what our responsibilities are. And then we have to take actions in that direction with God's leading and guidance. And, this movement hasn't done that, right? The movement is divided. Doesn't have any clear understanding of what it believes. It's all over the place. People, it kind of reminds me of before I was an Adventist in churches I went to, where people can believe, all of these contradictory things at the same time and not even be aware of it, right? You can have a Sunday school class where, somebody says one thing and everybody just agrees with them. And then somebody says the opposite and everybody agrees with them. And even the people who have said the opposite don't even have the idea that they said the opposite. They don't even understand that the things that they're saying are incongruent. They don't fit together, but yet they believe them because they all sound good. It's all phrased in a way that it just sounds good, right? But that means they don't understand the substance of what they're saying. And that's how the movement is presently. People haven't sat down and nailed out what we mean, what we understand. And so we can be supporting people who believe quite different things. That's why they can say, well, it's great, Jeff is writing these articles and it agrees with what I'm doing, right? Paul can say that, and anybody who opposes Jeff, obviously they're just, out in left field. But the reality is, you can't just say you support what Jeff is doing because he was our leader of the past, when he's basically rejected everything that Colin is teaching, right? Now, Colin can pick and choose and say, well, he's got this idea, that Trump's going to maybe come back in. So we agree. But they're on completely different bases. It would be like me saying, well, I support Edwin Thiel's chronology because he has 723 BC marked as the fall of Samaria, right? And you look at that and say, oh, I'm going to use Thiel to support the fall of Samaria in 723 BC. I've seen people do it, right? Except that Edwin Thiel's fall of Samaria happens before Hezekiah ever becomes king of Judah, right? So he just has a completely different chronology. Or somebody using Edwin Thiel's chronology to support the idea that Manasseh wasn't taken captive in 677, right? Not recognizing you can't mix those things. They just don't mix, right? So we have to be consistent and we have to have reasons for what we believe. So we believe that midnight is future, that Raphia is a future event, and that we're moving towards it. And these lines, as we're looking at it in this way, it seems to fit really well with Raphaean Paneum and this coming Sunday law. That we have these events that have to unfold if we're going to take this history in parallel with ours, right? Okay, so our time is up. Now I'm going to mention something before we close in prayer. So we are planning to have, and Dwight, I haven't talked to you, so I want to ask your opinion on it. So on Sunday, we want to have, or not Sunday, on Sabbath, I was talking about Sunday school. We want to have 10 o'clock to 11, a Sabbath school, and 11 to 12, a sermon.
All right.
Would you want to move your 6:30 study to 10 o'clock? So that would be 9 o'clock where you live.
If that works, that's fine.
Okay. So I think that's what we're going to do. I'm going to send out an email to that effect. So we're going to have that time Sabbath morning to prepare for our studies at So it's going to be 10, of course. Here, I believe in East Africa, it's going to be 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock p.m. on Saturday night. That they would then, because we're 10 hours apart right now because of the time change, and they don't have a time change. So we'll be doing that. And then if we need to change it, once we have a time change, then we might look at that, once the spring happens. But this allows for people there to participate in our studies on Sabbath. It's not going to be Sabbath there anymore. Sabbath will be over. But you understand what I'm saying, so that they can participate in our Sabbath studies. And now I'm not going to be able to be here every Sabbath at that time, because there's the odd time I go to Warburg Church. So at that time, somebody else would have to run the meetings, right? So probably Iran do that. So I just have to make sure Iran's going to be available for those. But anyway, for the next few Sabbaths, that's what we want to do. And I'm going to do the sermon for now, and Dwight do the Sabbath school. So that means you're going to move your studies to the Sabbath school studies. Okay?
That's fine.
But you just get an hour now. You don't get an hour and a half. So okay. Okay, so let's close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for the study here this morning, and we pray that you can bring us together again tomorrow to continue to look at our history as we read it in Daniel chapter 11. We're thankful, Lord, for what you are showing us. We know that some details may not be correct, but we believe that you have directed and guided in this study. And if we are going off track, we ask that you can show this to us logically and clearly. We ask that you can continue to watch over us. Thank you for the work that you are doing in our lives, in our homes, even amidst the struggles and conflicts that we face. So we just pray for your angels' care and protection, and that you can bring us together again to worship. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.